You talk a lot about practicing meditation and also prayer. And you say something that was interesting that you said about using silence to hear in between the lines. So can you share what that means to hear in between the lines through prayer, meditation, mindfulness, and kind of what this all means? How can we understand this? There's a lot of noise about it, but what does it really mean?
Yeah, let's talk about the term and let's talk about that specific answer. So when I hear the word mindfulness, to me, what it really means is intentionality. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is, are you crafting, designing, and intentionally creating your life? Or are you just coasting in the passenger seat of your life, which is just dragging you and driving you wherever it's taking you? And so it's the difference between being the driver or being in the passenger seat. Mm-hmm. And so to me, living intentionally is what allows you to live a life of by design. And so I'll give you an example of what mindfulness can look like. There's something in the book that I talk about called the 3 S's, which are sights, sense, and sounds. Now, if you think about that, we're exposed to sights, sense, and sounds every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day. But how many of us have crafted those to be sights, sense, and sounds that we want in our life? So this is what I realized. When we were monks, one of the most important things was, what was the first thing you saw, the sight, when you woke up?
And right now, most people are probably seeing their screen.
Yeah, I think 80% of people look at their screens first thing in the morning and the last thing at the night. So you're seeing your screen first thing in the morning. But what are you really seeing? You're seeing everyone else's priorities. You're seeing everyone else's issues and challenges. You're seeing everyone else's messages to you, which means you're already starting your day off reactively. But what if you started your morning looking at a painting that inspired you, or a picture of a loved one that brought joy in your heart, or your favorite quote by Lewis or by anyone else that when you read that in the morning, you were like, oh yeah, I feel in charge today to make a difference in the world. So imagine the first thing you saw in the morning was something inspiring. How much would your day change? That's mindfulness. Mindfulness is being intentional and mindful about what you are exposing yourself to. Let's talk about sounds next. So sounds was something that I started to study actually much later from a modern life perspective. But when we were monks, we would wake up to birds, we would wake up to water, we'd wake up to gongs or cymbals. Chants, exactly, which are all beautiful sounds. Now, the crazy thing is all of us wake up to something called an alarm. Now,
right, just like...
Literally, I don't know why anyone would want to wake up
alarmed.
To an alarm. Why would you want to wake up alarmed? It means now your system is alarming. Like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to wake up in shock, in a state of like a jolt? I don't think that's a positive way to wake up. So changing the sound that you wake up to. Now, I'm not saying that everyone can wake up to nature sounds. Maybe you're one of those people who just hit the snooze button again. But what if you woke up to a sound or a song that brought you joy? Now, when I lived in New York for 2 years, between 2016 and 2018, I started to feel quite exhausted by the end of the day. And I was really looking into like, why is it that I feel tired? And I started to realize I came across this term called cognitive load. And what it means is that a lot of the sounds that you hear in New York City are sounds that are insignificant for your mind to process. Drilling, construction work, taxis honking, driving, cars screeching, scratching.
People yelling at each other in the streets.
People yelling at each other on the streets. Like, all of that sound is called cognitive load, where your brain is now trying to make sense of meaningless sound.
Or it's also just like, should I be afraid? This is a loud sound. Is my brain going to fight or flight? Like, I need to protect myself. So you're always being alarmed.
Yeah, exactly. And you hear sirens. The amount of sirens that I remember hearing on the streets. Now, when you hear sirens have an emotional trigger. And they have an emotional response to them. So think about your day. Think about when you come home from work. Well, now you're working from home.
Right.
What sound do you want to hear when you're working? What sound do you want to hear at the end of the day? When you sound design your life, that's called mindfulness. That's being intentional. Yes. And then finally, scent. Scent is such a powerful sense that we're not even aware. How many of you, when you smell your favorite food, can't already wait to eat it? Like, you can almost taste it.
Salivating.
You're salivating. You can taste it already just through scent. Why is it that every time you walk
pizza.
my favorite, I think pizza has one of the best scents.
Well, your wife Rowdy's got some amazing food. That was amazing scent. When I walked in the kitchen last week, I was like, It's amazing.
That was for
Indian
you.
food.
That was special. That was for you.
unbelievable.
That was for you. That was a good meal. That was a
good.
really good meal. She really appreciated that you love to eat too. Like she was happy. Her heart was full.
Exactly. Bring a former jock into your house and you'll clear all the food out.
She was like, I've never seen someone eat that much. And I was like, he's a, this like big American dude. I was like, Lewis is like, he can eat. And so, no, it was great. She was so happy that you appreciated it so much. She really appreciated that.
But the scent is important in your life.
When you walk into a massage spa, it's the scent, the eucalyptus, the lavender, the sandalwood. It
puts you in a peaceful state.
Dude, scent puts you in zen without trying. And so mindfulness is intentionally creating a life that makes you feel what you want to feel without having to just create the feeling from inside. You may say, Jay, I really struggle trying to be positive. I struggle trying to deal with anxiety. I struggle trying to be focused. Your sight, sense, and sounds can help you do that.
Yeah.
And you start creating an environment where you naturally feel that. Like today when I walked into your studio, I saw your books, I saw all these motivational quotes, I saw a boxing glove, and it's like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm in a uplifting environment, right? So you already get triggered.
Exactly. Yeah, I think a friend of mine mentioned one time on the podcast, Chris Lee, said you want to create an environment like a rainforest where things can thrive and grow as opposed to having an environment like a desert where things go to die.
That's beautiful.
And if you have sights, sense, and sounds that are like a desert for your life or your heart, then it's going to be hard to grow those things from your heart. But if you create an environment of a rainforest where things can grow, water, nature, cool air, things like that, then you can really start to cultivate that growth. Yeah. You mentioned about creating and designing your life. How much of the world do you think we receive by being here? And how much of the world do we create ourselves?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. It's a complete dynamic dance between what the Vedic tradition would call fate and free will. So fate is what is already created for you, and a good example would be the place you were born, the type of family you grew up in, the socioeconomic background you had. It was already there when you walked into the world. But within that, you had choices where your free will came about. You had the choice to either do what everyone in your neighborhood did or to do something different. You had the choice to have a relationship with a particular person or not. So what happens is that we're constantly creating new spaces from which we have another choice.
Right.
And so you kind of see it as this dynamic dance between, okay, now I'm in this situation, and now what is my choice in this situation? So I would say, I'm not saying it's equal, I'm saying it's a dynamic balance and a switching process where you're constantly creating a new level, and then now in that level you have a next choice.
Because we didn't have the choice to be created here. We were here, and that wasn't our choice. Now everything after that is our choice, right?
Yeah, and there are some traditions, and I'm a big diver into like reincarnation and past lives. So according to the beliefs of reincarnation and past lives, you have at some point made a choice to be here. But taking it more simplistically, the truth is that when you're brought into a situation, it's the best analogy that I've heard, and it's been told for years, is of a father is an alcoholic. One of the sons that he has decides to become an alcoholic because his father's an alcoholic. The other son decides to never drink alcohol because his father's an alcoholic.
Right.
So they were exposed to the same situation and same scenario. Same environment. But they both made different choices based on their experience. And that's the choice element. That's the element that we should be trying to empower in our lives, because we can constantly say, I'm limited by my environment, or I've been restricted by my environment. And hey, it's true. There are so many of us that have been limited and restricted. But by now you repeating that, you are going to repeat that restriction in your life.
How much of a positive environment supports us in our growth or holds us back? There are some people who have the perfect family situation, resources, beautiful backyards and nature, who are lazy. And there are others who have, divorced parents, abusive friends, an environment of a desert, and they figure out a way to thrive.
Totally.
How much importance does our environment play in our overall success?
If you look at the examples that you just shared and you really analyzed life, you'd see very little. because you see people craft their own life. So a good example for me is that when I came back from living in the ashram, and there were other people who may have been monks who'd also left the path, and I came back to a not financially successful or supportive family. So my family doesn't have abundant wealth and couldn't necessarily have taken care of me or paid for me forever. Mm-hmm. And I had to figure out my own life. And that to me was a great sense of impetus and incentive to go and figure it out and learn new skills and network and meet people. And I saw other friends whose parents had like a property portfolio with like 10 properties ready to hand them over. They had a BMW the second that they came out, whatever, you know, from their own life.
Yep.
Or I even have friends that had all of that and didn't become monks and didn't even find careers. So I've also got friends that I went to school with that today don't even have careers, even though their parents were really well established.
Right.
Which has, all of these examples have continued me to believe that we truly have influence in our, more than our environment. Our environment affects us for sure. It plants seeds and weeds into our life, but there is still a choice. And I think even if you feel there isn't a choice, simply by accepting that there is, it means you have a chance to get out of there. And I think that's what...
Because if you don't accept that there is, then you're just going to stay stuck.
Correct. Like there have been so many times in my life, and there's a beautiful quote from Edison. I don't think I said this last time, but if I did, it's worth repeating. He said that when you believe you've exhausted all options, remember this, you haven't. And the reason why I love that is your mind continuously feels stuck when it's tried the obvious. And that's why a lot of creativity and focus studies say that the first 10 ideas that come to your mind are never the most interesting. It's when you get into the 11th idea that you start breaking the pattern. And so if someone asks you, oh, what's your best business idea? Your first 10 ideas are probably not that innovative. And so the mind constantly gets stuck on that train. And you've got to keep reminding yourself that there is another door. There could be another pathway. I was thinking about a piece of advice that, so one of my closest spiritual mentors, who was in London, I knew him since I was probably like 12 and properly since I was 18. He passed away this year from stage 4 brain cancer. And he'd had brain cancer for about, I think like 4 years now. And so I hadn't really had a real interaction with him for the past few years because every time I saw him, he wasn't fully functioning in his short-term memory. His long-term memory was there, but his short-term memory wasn't. And I remember speaking to him probably about 7-8 years ago and asking him the question. I said to him, you know, I've got so many ideas. There's so many things I could do. Where do I start? And he said this beautiful thing to me. He said, you know what? Your role should be to open up every door possible. And he said, let the world close the doors you're not meant to walk through and walk through the ones that remain open. And what I realized is most of us are just not opening up enough doors because we think we only have the option of 2 doors. We look at life as binary. 0 and 1, 0 and 1, right? It's just
this
A
or
B, this or that. And I mean, I think you'd say this too about you and every guest you ever had on. I don't think life is ever this or that. It's like this, that, and maybe that, and that. And there's always a gap.
Of course. The challenge that people have that I've sensed a lot is the fear of criticism when you go after something that you weren't supposed to do or that people don't think you're supposed to do. Why do so many people fear criticism from peers, family, friends, the media? Why is that such a big fear? And how do we overcome criticism from others?
Psychologically, we feel a sense of safety and security when we think people agree with us. Right? That is just psychologically true, that we would rather avoid conflict and sit in a space where we agree, and therefore we have something called confirmation bias and the echo chamber, where we keep surrounding ourselves with thoughts and ideas that are similar and reaffirm our beliefs. Now, I think that you can have that and at the same time entertain ideas that you're not sure about yet. And so one of my favorite examples was MIT did this study where they asked people which person was more creative and innovative. And they showed 2 charts. One chart was employee A and the other chart was employee B. The chart for employee A, all of the people they knew each other and knew them back. So it was almost like a closed loop. And employee B, they knew lots of people who didn't know each other. And they found that people who have more people in their network who don't know each other are more likely to be creative and productive.
Really? Why is that?
Because they expose you to opposing ideas and they may counteract how you think. So one of my favorite examples of this is a conversation between Mark Zuckerberg and one of his mentors. So Mark Zuckerberg told this story at the Facebook headquarters a few years back. I wasn't there, I've seen it on video, and I'm sure it's available. And he talks about how when he was struggling with the direction of Facebook in 2009, he approached his mentor. And his mentor happened to be Steve Jobs.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
That's really
yeah,
cool.
It's so cool, man. And so anyway, so Mark Zuckerberg goes to Steve Jobs and he says, I'm struggling with the direction of Facebook. Remember at that time, Facebook was 5 years old.
There was no fan pages, I don't think.
I don't think there was no creators. I don't think there were fan pages. It was very much used by university students at that stage.
Yeah.
Like I think it was mainly like Ivy Leagues.
College kids.
College kids. And I don't even think it was international in a massive way. Very early days, and now we can't even think of that. But 2009, I mean, you just about had the iPhone and just about had Instagram
Crazy,
and YouTube.
man.
So he went up to Steve Jobs and he said, I'm struggling with the direction of Facebook. What do I do? Now, Steve Jobs at that time obviously was already the founder of one of the biggest brands on the planet, and obviously the brand still is. He had access to investors. He had access to business coaches. I'm sure he had access to life coaches. He had access to
health experts. Everything.
He had access to anything. Like I don't think there was anyone, scientists, PhDs. I don't think there's anyone in the world who Steve Jobs couldn't have called up at the time. And Steve Jobs said something amazing. He said, you know what, Mark? I think you should go and live in an ashram in India.
He did not.
He did.
No
It's
way.
a true story. He goes, and when you go to live in the ashram in India, that's where, if you spend some time there, that's where you'll find your answer.
Shut up.
And Mark did it.
No
Mark
way.
went to the ashram. It's a true story.
For how long?
I believe he was there for, I've seen two online. I've seen two versions of the exact time he was there. I've seen some people said it was a couple of days or a week, or some people said it's a month. So I think it's hazy how much time he actually spent there. But he went. And he says that based on that experience, that's where he found the direction of Facebook, to be connecting people. Now, the reason why I love that story is because it's the unobvious, alternative, random connection. And when Harvard did a study of 3,000 executives, they looked at and asked them, what's the number one skill for being a good leader? And a lot of people would say communication. A lot of people would say vision, strategy, humility. And the number one answer that they got from 3,000 executives was the one word, which is called associating. And what that means is the ability to spot patterns where everyone else doesn't see them. And that's the connect, that real leaders can spot patterns and connections in anomalies. So most people will be like, what has an ashram got to do with a tech platform?
Right.
But that is where you expand your mind to find answers that you never expected.
How important is creating alone time with noises, people, busy work, to allow your mind to expand? Is that the only time, in that silence? I think you mentioned it. Silence to hear in between the lines.
Yeah.
Is that where we start to hear what we're supposed to be creating, where we're supposed to be heading, our mission?
I'm really glad you brought that back. I wanted to get back to that. So when we talk about, there's a beautiful statement by David Lynch, who's movie producer and a deep meditator. And he says that prayer is how you talk to God, and meditation is how God talks to you.
Ooh.
And whether you believe in God or the universe or spirit or divine, whatever it means, the point is that there is a dialogue and a conversation.
So prayer is like you're speaking, you're saying, here's what I want.
Here's how I feel.
Help me.
Yeah.
And meditation is more receiving.
Receiving, yeah. And so I love that statement, because I think it makes it very clear that we have to have a dialogue with the universe. We have to have a dialogue with people in our lives. We have to have a dialogue, and there's both giving and receiving. So when I talk about hearing in between the lines, the best example I can give you, Lewis, is let's take a look at you and your relationship and mine and my wife's relationship. One of us is always traveling.
Yeah.
So you travel, your partner travels, I travel, my wife travels. Sometimes we're missing each other. Imagine you've got really busy and hectic. Do you think, and anyone listening or watching, you can ask the same question. If you were really busy and hectic and stressed out, do you think your partner feels comfortable to tell you how they feel and get your attention?
If I'm busy, stressed out, overwhelmed, will my partner tell me how I feel about themselves or about...
Yeah, do you think they would feel confident to be like, Lewis, I need to tell you something really important?
I don't think they would.
They wouldn't.
Yeah.
They really wouldn't, because
They don't want to stress you out more.
They don't want to stress you out
You're
more.
not present, all these things.
Exactly. So exactly that. And so what happens is, when you're still, your mind and body actually get to speak to you and give you signals of how they feel. And so when you're still, that's when you notice that ache in your foot that you haven't noticed for a month. Sometimes when you slow down, that's when you get sick, because your body wasn't allowing itself to be sick because you were pushing it to get through stuff. And so just like your partners can't communicate with you until you slow down, your body and mind can't communicate with you until you still. And so there's a beautiful Buddhist teaching that says, what movement does for the body, stillness does for the mind. And so when we find that space, stillness, and solitude, you really are able to hear your deepest desires and challenges, your physical pains and areas of growth. It's one of the reasons why when people meditate, they feel sleepy afterwards and they think they're doing it wrong, but actually they're doing it right. Meditation just told you needed more sleep.
You need to rest.
Yeah, meditation was just a signal. So sometimes when I meditate with people that I'm coaching,
It's like pass out.
yeah, some of them will be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Jay. I'm just feeling so tired." And I'm like, "No,
Then sleep, then rest."
Yeah, that's what your body's telling you, because you finally listened." And some people are like, "Oh, Jay, I feel so energized." And I'm like, "Yeah, because you allowed yourself to be in line with your body, and now your body's saying that you feel energized, and that's great. You've got that energy. Go work out. Go build something." So.
Or you've cleared out those negative thoughts, or you've let go of those distractions, or that resentment, and so you're not feeling this weight, so you feel lighter.
Correct. And so that stillness and silence is one of my favorite ways for you to actually build that relationship with hearing your inner voice.
Is there too much silence? Like if you say, okay, 5 hours a day, is there a tipping point when you're like, okay, I think you do 2 hours every morning, but a lot of people say, well, I've only got 20 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
Is 5 hours too much? Is an hour? What is the maximum or minimum or the sweet spot you think for people to be silent every day?
Yeah.
To live a great life?
I think 20 minutes is a great starting point.
Yeah.
Because 20 minutes is significant enough time for your mind to switch off. So we hear that studies showed that we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day.
And a lot of them are
negative. 80% are negative, and I'm guessing a lot of them are repeated.
Yeah.
And so if you're only going to say, I'm going to do 5 minutes, it just takes 5 minutes to switch off. Like it takes 5 minutes to just overcome that noise. And so I'd say that 20 minutes is a good amount of time. And hey, you're not trying, and I think this is the challenge with meditation and mindfulness, you're not trying to empty your mind. You're just trying to be present with it and actually listen to it and experience it.
If you want to learn more about how to master your mind, check out this next video right here.
So when people begin to disengage and get beyond themselves, you are at your absolute best when you get beyond yourself. Now, getting the person to that point.
How does someone get to that point?
Yeah, so we teach them that formula. We teach them